Hello, friends, and welcome to Montessori 101, a live show from Child of the Redwoods, all about the magic of Montessori. I'm Aubrey Hargis.
And I'm David Hargis. So whether you're watching live, hello out there, it's great to see you guys, or you're watching the replay, or maybe you are listening to the podcast version. It doesn't matter. We're just it was all wiggly. We're just happy you're joining with us. And if you want to learn more about our work, head over to childoftheredwoods.com.
Yes. All right. Well, today we are talking about Earth Day. Now, is today Earth Day?
No, yesterday was.
No, actually, yesterday was Earth Day, and David and I didn't actually do anything to celebrate it, although we have in years past. And we want to talk about how Earth Day relates to the Montessori education method. Yeah. Right. And we're going to propose the idea to you. And you can listen and see if you agree with us that a Montessori education is inherently environmentalist and that it's not wrong to celebrate Earth Day. There are maybe many fun benefits of doing that, but that really isn't a symbol of environmentalism in terms of validating your child's education is an environmentalist approach, right? So as Montessorians, we are earth-loving people, and usually a Montessori classroom, teacher, school will readily embrace something called Earth Day just by its name because we love the earth, and that is what we really want to teach our children. But honestly, it's just not 100% necessary to have a day of earth-friendly activities, because in a Montessori environment, whether you're at home or in a school, in a classroom, you should be doing Earth Day-like activities pretty much every single day.
Yeah. It's what is Earth Day?
Well, as a child, I knew Earth Day as a day where there might be banners up at my local Walmart, and there might be like a little, I don't know, festival or something in the park. I remember going to like Earth Day festivities, celebrations, where we would go and see examples of like, I don't know, a little booth that says like you should recycle, or I don't know, maybe a little signage that's like, how clean is your water? And you would go up to the little booth and maybe learn a little more about that kind of environmentalist topic. Is that what you remember about Earth Day?
No. I grew up in the country. We didn't have Earth Day.
Maybe I'm thinking about when we lived in Dallas.
Maybe. Well, you definitely lived in a college, but you grew up in a small town, not as nearly as small as mine. And there was a college there, and Earth Day started with the colleges. So maybe there was more of an emphasis in your little town because there was a college.
Maybe.
But, and it's become more common, right? I mean, I think in the 90s, you remember Captain Planet? The cartoon Captain Planet?
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like over the decades, it became more and more common. But, when I was in elementary school in the 80s, in the part of the world I lived in, it just wasn't a thing. But, it's interesting. I was just looking up the data, and it says that for the younger generation, the Gen Z, it's like 75 or 85% are worried about the earth. And that is much higher than older generations, even folks like us. So whether or not you celebrate Earth Day or you had a history of Earth Day, it's something that for younger people has become a worry. What is happening to the earth? And so when we talk about the celebration of Earth Day from a Montessori perspective, part of what we want to do is make sure that kids have a sense of empowerment, because the topic of climate change or the interconnectivity of the species, there's a lot of doomer news, right? Doomerism in the world, and it can feel bleak, and kids can be bombarded by that because this movement went from sort of the celebration, a small celebration, that I became aware of it in college, or maybe it was mocked. I had a mocking relationship to it in the 80s or something, like it's something for hippies.
All right. And I did grow up with hippie parents.
That's
so
right.
maybe that is the difference for me. Like
Totally. But
I got a copy of Rachel Carlson's book as a coming of age book when I was like 12. Yeah.
Some of us received Judy Blume, others receive Rachel Carlson.
That's right.
Anyway, so yeah, but it's become such a present thing, right? You hear a lot about it, and young people are very concerned about it, and it's such a big abstract concept that it can feel really scary. And so part of what we're wanting to talk about today, or what I'm interested in talking through, is in the Montessori approach, we can actually help kids understand the beauty of the earth and the interconnectivity of all the things on the earth and our stewardship of the earth, of this creation, this beautiful thing that we live in, that is ours, to cohabitate with all the other creatures and things of this beautiful creation on. And we don't have to despair when things seem to be going in the wrong direction. That actually, because we can understand that relationship and begin to think about the consequences of what kind of a life we want to live, we can start to take control of it, and we can start to move forward. And that is especially true for those younger generation, right? They have a chance, because when we talk about changing climate and so forth, it's a generational process. So those of you who have littles right now, they're going to be the leaders and the workers and the thinkers and the artists that are really not only going to live in that future that may not be what we want it to be, but they also will be the leaders who, depending on how we teach them to think about the world and all of the things that live within it, can make the choices that would be beneficial to it. And I think that's where the educational part and where the Montessori part really can come in. It can teach that interconnectivity, and it could give you a sense of control and hope, which is so vital to kids. That nihilism that is, I feel, very present in our society, and that children feel just as much as adults, is a terrible, toxic sin. And as educators, as parents, as people who love children or work with children, whatever our role is, we have an obligation to empower them, to make them feel like they can do something about it without shying away from the reality. And the approach to that is science and education. They can do that.
Yeah. So when I think about Earth Day, as myself as a young teacher of children, mostly kindergartners, I taught a lot of Earth Day back in my teaching days in public schools. And it was always very optimistic. Of course, this was the early 2000s. And I feel like during that time, like there was talk about global warming, but it was kind of talked about as like something that we can fix, something that we can take on and prevent from happening if we put our heads together and we all work to reduce the amount of plastic in our homes and to care for our earth and protest against pollution at factories, that this was a preventable thing. And there was a lot of excitement about Earth Day and hope in it. And it was just really a time to celebrate, the things that we can do as people. And these days, I think Earth Day, I don't know if it still has as much hope for people. I know it doesn't for us. We haven't been to an Earth Day celebration in a long time. It felt like the last time we went to an Earth Day celebration, it was very kind of corporate. And it was about like, here are the products that we're making from recycled bottles. You should buy these. And it just didn't feel, or it was about like wind power and how it was going to save everything and you should switch over to it.
That's right.
But it felt, we were skeptical at the time, even though wind power is,
it's an amazing technology.
It's amazing technology, and it is a potentially very sustainable source of energy. But that doesn't mean that it's problem free. And also it doesn't mean that money's not all tied up in the production of it.
And that goes to the point with thinking about the real connection to Montessori. So anything that you're talking about that is really complicated, like ecology, earth, the future, is not simple. There's no one simple solution.
Right.
And everything we choose will have consequences, and sometimes devastating consequences. And that can be both continuing to pollute, for example, or stopping all production of something. Like if we stopped pumping oil in suddenly, the economy would completely and totally collapse, and there would be immiseration around the globe. That's not something that you can ignore. You have to think through that. Now, as adults, those are the challenges we have to face. They're not for littles. But when they're little is when we start to help them become critical thinkers and problem solvers who are capable of thinking through as they get older and holding those complex ideas in their mind and then acting morally to make a decision. And so when we celebrate Earth Day, part of what we're doing is we're helping to bring awareness to the child, and we're not going to shy away from the complexities of the world and how these things fit together, because that deprives them of this ability to become actually smart, good leaders in our world and society in the future. And I think that is the kind of the antidote, where we had this very simplistic view of Earth Day that kind of evolved this very, we call corporate kind of view. You know, Earth Day brought to you by Exxon or something, and you're like, wait a minute, that seems a little ironic. But you know, to sanitize it gives you kind of a sanitized view of like, well, all you have to do, one little simple action, put this can in the recycling bin, and you're doing your part. That's actually not, if you study it and learn it, that probably isn't actually going to do you any good. It's too complicated and too big. But instead of getting afraid of that big complexity, we can arm children with the critical thinking skills and the creativity and the moral reasoning that will, as they get older and are capable of it, be able to go and make the harder decisions about what kind of a world do we really want to have. And that's true for Earth Day. It's true for how we approach peace or war in our world, or equity of any kind, racial discrimination, class division, all of those really, really essential questions that require a lot of creative thinking and problem solving and bravery and moral bravery. Children are the only way. That's what Maria believed. It's what we would believe. It's what we believe as well.
Yeah.
So let's dig into it. Let's talk about how you can address environmentalism in this curriculum.
Okay. So what we want to do in the Montessori curriculum is really empower children with that deep sense of responsibility and hope. And so Maria Montessori actually noticed in her very first classroom, the Casa dei Bambini original, the House of Children, that she was working with these little children who are in a very urban environment, in an impoverished urban environment in a big city. And one of the first things that she did that she noticed was healing and helpful to them was to bring them out of the classroom that was indoors and to bring the classroom outdoors. And so if you visit a whole lot of Montessori schools, you might notice that there's both an indoor classroom and an outdoor classroom. Not in every single school, obviously. Not every single school has the resources for it.
Yep.
But it is more common to have an outdoor classroom in the Montessori field than it is maybe in other methods of education. So in a Montessori outdoor classroom, what would be happening? Well, in Maria's outdoor classroom, it was it was just a courtyard essentially in the middle of a like an apartment complex.
Yeah, it was very concrete.
And there was a lot of concrete, but what she did was she created gardens for the children, and she encouraged them to do work outside, to go water those plants. I think it probably just started with the plants or the trees that were growing in the courtyard itself. Even though there was a lot of concrete, there must have been some greenery. And what was there, she allowed the children to go out and tend. And she noticed that the children who went outside and tended these plants came back calmer and just happier. And, really the Montessori curriculum can kind of be boiled down to what makes children happy.
Yeah.
And so she noticed what makes children happy is caring for nature. And so that became a core part of the curriculum. So at the next school that she helped to create, it was an influence in. She intentionally made a big emphasis on we have to have a garden for the children. And so there was this brief period in the very beginning of the Montessori, as Montessori was spreading throughout Italy, the gardens got bigger and bigger and bigger,
Yeah.
which was really fun. So you ended up having Montessori schools where there was just like a very small classroom, but a really big garden for children to tend, where they were encouraged to go into the shed and get out their little hose, which were made miniature size for like
child
3
size,
to 6-year-olds. And they would go out into the garden, and there would be a guide out there who, hopefully had a bit more of a green thumb than I do. And she was like instructing the children on how to hoe, and how to plant the plants for the seasons. Now, Montessori schools today often kind of run into trouble with that because of the way that our school system usually starts in like September, runs through May, and then stops for the summer, which would be the primary time where you would be outside tending vegetables and things. And so sometimes schools who still carry on that garden emphasis, it ends up just being the teachers coming to school over the summer day after day to try and care for this garden so that there will be something to harvest when the children come back.
It's not a coincidence that we don't have school in the summer, and it's not because of vacation.
Yes, but ideally, Maria envisioned that the children would be witness to the entire growth cycle and process, from planting to harvest, to letting the land lie fallow. She just noticed that children were happier when they were caring for the earth itself, when they were growing their own food that they could eat. They had that visceral connection to the land. And so that is really the origin of Montessori's emphasis on environmentalism. And it's probably why, because Maria Montessori died before Earth Day was invented. But in 1970, when Earth Day was invented as an official day, it was actually
consciousness or remembrance.
It was actually invented as a protest day, kind of inspired by the protests of the 1960s. By 1969, college students were still out there protesting, and some higher up officials, senators, and all kind of got this idea that they could capture the energy of the civil rights protests and infuse it with an environmentalist mindset. And this does go back to Rachel Carson, because it was inspired by her original work,
Silent Spring,
pesticides.
So and I want to emphasize here, because Earth Day and the environmental movement has become intensely politicized, but I'd love to emphasize that Richard Nixon created the EPA, and the Earth Day was celebrated first during the Nixon administration, and Nixon is not a leftist.
Well, I thought that this was interesting. I thought that Earth Day, the origins of Earth Day, came from Senator Gaylord Nelson, who I don't know a whole lot about otherwise. He was a junior senator from Wisconsin, and he actually announced this as like a teach-in day for college campuses. So it was originally a movement that was for the field of education. It came out of those college protests. But he actually got Pete McCloskey, who is a big Republican conservative congressman, to serve as co-chair. And so it wasn't just like a movement for environmentalist, hippie-loving liberals.
Wow.
It was a movement that was created from I don't know how to say, like a wholesome political perspective, right? Like everyone was on board.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't uncommon. So hunters have a vested interest in the environment, fishers, farmers, urban dwellers, everybody. Like this is our planet. And wherever you are on the religious or political spectrum,
your water is polluted, then you're going to have problems.
Creation care is a thing. For those in the faith community that's familiar to us. So it's not divided. And so when Montessori is teaching this, there's not a political agenda. She's just recognizing that the children are drawn. You use the word fun. What's fun for the kids, and what's fun for the kids is things
I think I used the word happiness.
Oh, happy better. So what made them happy? What made them happy was the learning, the being together, right? I think we conflate. It's a really profound idea. Like we say, what makes a child happy? Well, we're going to give them toys or candy or something.
Yeah.
And that does make them happy in that it like pumps up that, adrenaline in some way or the sugar high or something. But that's not true joy or happiness. Like that's not an intrinsic happiness. And what children display, and humans as well, is a happiness when they see goodness in the world, including the balance of life and around with nature. So,
well, she said, Maria Montessori's perspective, happiness comes through work.
Yeah.
And so when the children were working to tend the plants or working to care for animals
or working with the materials or doing a concept in the classroom, otherwise, right? Work.
Yeah. Work brings happiness.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Speaking of work, I think on to this point, I know Maria, her thoughts then progressed into the point where by the middle school years, the idea was that the kid would be out on a farm fully. So it's almost like the classroom is fully the outdoor by the time to get to that older age.
Right.
So she really kind of continued to progress.
She did. Yeah. And also those in our lower curriculum, our lower elementary program, will note like the emphasis on physical science gets really, really big. Seeing ourselves as like microscopic beings in this gigantic universe.
Totally.
It brings a humility.
Exactly.
And so children, I think Maria Montessori really wanted children to grow up with a deep sense of humility, as opposed to like the great ego that might be creating the, not really caring about the pollution that's creating in order to make a bunch of money.
Yeah. Or just this sense of ego that you can control creation.
Yeah. And so she really wanted to bring in that sense of humility and being humble in this great and beautiful world that we live in.
Yep.
So there were several things that she did in the classroom that you can do in your own home. One, you could start a garden. And if you don't have access to the outdoors, say you don't have a backyard, you live in an urban area, just like Maria Montessori's original kids did, maybe you could have some plants inside your own home.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Yeah, hopefully you have a window somewhere, put a little tiny plant in it.
My parents had a terrarium when I was really little, and it was a very 70s kind of thing. It looked like a dome, but I loved that. I just loved looking at it, and it's all many, many, many years later. I have, every now and again you'll see one like in an antique shop, and it's just wonderful. So whether you can have like a potted plant, or you make a terrarium, or you have something. Small,
a garden,
any kind of greenery or
some kind of garden, and whether it's just a single potted plant and you call it like that is your garden, it is enough. If you are teaching your child to care for it as a source of life on the earth.
That's right.
And so that's one thing that you can do is embrace the gardening aspect of Montessori. Another thing you can do is you can teach your child to refine their senses. And this is found in our sensorial curriculum. It's actually also kind of backed in all of the other lessons that are in the Montessori curriculum, because it all starts with the refinement of the senses, as our primary members hopefully know by now. We've talked so much about the hand in our latest session of primary. But I really feel like it makes sense if you can't smell the pollution in the air, like maybe you don't even think about it, or like it. So in Montessori, we want to really refine those senses so children feel that connection very deeply in their bones.
Totally. Yeah.
And so it does. It helps us to slow down. It helps us to concentrate. It lengthens concentration. And as David indicated later on, when your child is having to make more complicated decisions, that process that they go through as young children will help them to become those critical thinkers or problem solvers.
They're going to enter that moral age in the second plane, and they're going to use these skills that they developed in the first plane to inform that journey. So, thinking about, persistence of life too, and how you might use your senses. So grass poking up through a crack in the sidewalk.
Right.
No matter what we do, it always seems to want to come back life. And the sort of feeling the roughness of the human-made concrete and the softness of the leaf that's poking up through can be a real sensorial experience.
Mhm.
And then from there can start to come deeper thoughts like, why does that grass keep coming back? How could it live underneath there?
Yeah.
What does this say? And even philosophical questions as they get into that moral age. Well, what does this say about what's more powerful, the concrete or the grass?
Right.
Which is an ecological question.
Yes. Another thing that we do in the classroom is we have a big emphasis on what we call grace and courtesy.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be boiled down to a three-way path: caring for the self, like one's recognizing one's body and caring for your body, your soul and your mind, caring for other people, and your community, and also caring for the environment. So self, others, and the environment, like that's the triad in grace and courtesy. And we literally teach lessons in this, very specific lessons in how to care for oneself, how to care for the environment. And I think gardening kind of fits in with that.
Yeah, watering a plant would be care for environment. Tidying up your space and keeping it neat and healthy for the things that live in it, which would be us.
Yeah. And if you're looking for a big list of that is found in our primary course.
Yep.
So we also teach about the planet really, really early in Montessori.
We do.
In other methods of education, you might start by teaching about the local neighborhood. I don't know if you have looked at other kindergarten curriculums.
Who are the people in your neighborhood?
I know. And I love it. But also, we start with the earth. We start with a globe, teach about our planet right from the get-go, rather than teaching about like our local neighborhood. So we kind of work from the outwards in rather than the in out.
That's right.
In Montessori. And we really love globes, and we have many, many globes in Montessori.
Yeah, there's a real tendency to focus on the self in a traditional or other forms of education, like what do you see in your environment? And that's definitely true in Montessori as well with the sensorial approach. But in Montessori, there is a really beautiful balance against that. There's like a focus on humility in a way. Like your sense is to explore the world, but you are only a small part of it, because even at a very young age, you're teaching about the solar system, the formation of the sun, that we are on a planet of many planets, that planet has many different things, and we call them biomes. So at a very young age, even before we get into what we would call political geography, which is like flag and stuff, we teach that the earth is this thing that exists and has this beautiful diversity and balance. And that beauty and balance existed before us, and frankly would exist without us. And we start to give kids that we call that cosmic education, right? We start to give kids that sense of cosmic knowledge, cosmic education very early on, so that they can put themselves and their sensorial experiences and eventually their moral decision making within the context of this broader thing. I am a part of the world. I am a part of my community. I am a part of my universe.
Yeah, we kind of this pulls into more broadly what we call the peace education curriculum in Montessori. All right, so I also want to make a note about plastic because plastic was not invented until when?
Well, they had a Bakelite and stuff in the early 20th century.
Okay.
Yeah, I think really post-war.
60s?
Well, post-war. I think
50s.
Yeah.
All right.
Somebody out there will know for sure.
Someone will know for sure.
It's a product of the chemical age, and the chemical age is a late 19th century, 20th century thing.
Maria Montessori passed in 1952, right after she wrote The Absorbent Mind. And so just as a note, no Montessori materials, there goes my alarm, no Montessori materials were created in plastic. They were all glass or wood. Maria Montessori worked with woodworkers to make most of her materials out of wood. And that being said, today you might see Montessori materials being made out of plastic. There might be plastic sets of golden beads. Even I've made DIY materials out of plastic or foam. So, it's not something that is 100% anti the Montessori approach. A lot of people will say that Montessori is anti-plastic because of the way it feels or because of the weight of plastic. But the real reason, and I will just to clear this up for those who might be wondering, the real reason plastic and Montessori don't go together is because they're not environmentally sound. Like it's an environmental emphasis rather than any kind of emphasis on texture or anything.
Yeah, plastics are made from oil,
Yeah.
and so the extraction of oil has environmental cost. Plastics can't be recycled, no matter what they tell you. It's not true that they're not recyclable.
Right.
Not really. And it costs a lot of energy to produce them. They're completely human made. I mean, there are materials like oil is a natural material, but the plastic didn't come out of the ground, right? We invented that.
Right.
So they aren't really sustainable, and we kind of already know that. We've known that for a long time. So yeah, if you can use glass, if you can use, which is 100% recyclable, if you can use metal, 100% recyclable, if you can use wood, which is renewable, and they also last a long time, then you're really doing a better thing.
Then it's better. Yeah. And so, we definitely found that there were uses. There still are uses for plastic, in our home. We definitely don't have a home that is devoid of that.
There's no way you could avoid it even if you wanted to.
Right.
I mean, there's plastic in the thing that I'm wearing.
I know.
It's just you can't
everywhere.
avoid it. But you can be. This goes to that like moral decision making that we're aiming to help children become capable of reasoning through moral decision making, and it comes from the sense of, all right, well, plastic is really, really useful. It's used everywhere. Where should it appear, and how should it be used, and should there be limits or not limits, and what would the consequence be if we didn't? Like, these are really hard questions, but when we give children the thinking skills to make those decisions, then we're really empowering them to have a healthy future. And one of the decisions that we can make as a model is to say, we're going to try and, if not use natural materials, at the very least, you use DIY or reused materials. So a lot of folks can't go out and buy natural materials. They're just too expensive. I totally get that. We certainly would not advocate that you go out and have to have a set of natural wood materials. We would say actually just DIY it or use another natural material to replicate that same thing, and then use plastic materials like for these beads that we have back here if necessary for those particular use cases where there's just not a better alternative. So it's about the judicious use and not the never use.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you for joining us for this little interesting historical discussion about Earth Day.
Yeah.
And also, I hope that you go away and you start thinking about ways that you can make your own home a little more environmentally sound and model that for your kids.
And give them a sense of hope that they can, that really the future is for them to make. And, we are going to leave to them, not just problems, but potential answers as well. And that is our greatest gift. That's what Maria believed about peace. For her, the issue of the day was all these great wars that she lived through. And in a lot of ways, the issue for the day for many of our young people is the environment. We want to follow that lead, which was that we can make children capable of handling and making good moral choices about the future on the things that scare them through good education. And so follow that lead, follow Maria's lead.
All right, friends, if you'd like to learn more about our work, you can go to childoftheredwoods.com. Yep. You can always reach David and I through our chat on our website.
Well, not always, but when we're available.
I was going to say, or through email.
Always through email.
Which is hello@childoftheredwoods.com. Feel free to email us or chat with us.
That's right.
Whether we're there or not.
That's true.
Anytime you like. All right. And if you want to listen to the rest of our episodes as a podcast, you can totally do that as well.
Yeah. And we have a bunch of episodes. We have some episodes on plants, house plants, and things that might be interesting to follow.
And just to give a plug for our YouTube channel, if you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It really does actually literally helps our YouTube channel. And it makes us feel good. All right. Thank you, friends.
Take
Talk
care.
to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.